The One for All, the most powerful quirk in the My Hero Academia universe, passed on from generation to generation, actually sucks ass. And here's why.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Now, before all of you just decide to go to the comment section and spam fucking hate messages, be like, "Oh, Biscord, I knew you were full of shit from the moment I saw your YouTube channel. How could you say One for All is the weakest quirk when haven't you seen everything that happened?" Oh, slow down, okay? Just relax. Let me explain myself. But first, for those who are new to this channel, hey everyone, my name is Biscord. Welcome to this channel where I just talk about the most random shit. I just talk about anything that's on my mind. It happens to just be anime all the time. But with that said, let's quickly just jump into this video. Alright, so I'm just going to be going on a small off-script rant. So basically, this entire video was sponsored by the My Hero Academia channel. Just for legal reasons, I just have to disclose that's not the case. But anyways, while I was reading chapter 308, I was waiting to voice act for my Muscular vs Izuku video. You can check my other videos if you don't know what I'm talking about. I basically just look at 3 chapters in a row and then I voice them out. Muscular vs Izuku is going to be my favorite fight so far. That's why I'm waiting for that to complete. But while I was reading the chapter and getting ready to voice it, I saw something very peculiar. Now, for those who have not actually read the chapter or do not read manga, which you totally should because manga is actually very nice to read. Anyways, while I was reading that manga, I saw that whole situation where Izuku started creating fog, like a smoke screen, because that's the 6th user's quirk, right? So while I was looking at that, I was like, okay, that's pretty interesting. And then the thing just snapped into my head, so I ended up like running to my WhatsApp status and I posted it. I was like, so the 6th user's quirk is a smoke screen, and I was like, oh shit! That explains why All Might releases a smoke screen every time his quirk deactivates. It now makes sense because it's basically him subconsciously using the other user's quirks. So despite like the narrative always trying to preach that Izuku he's the only user to be using the other user's quirks, All Might actually did it with that whole smoke screen. Although he didn't plan to use it, Izuku didn't plan to use it either. All Might was the first person, as far as we can tell, who was able to use other users' quirks, and so far we could see that the only thing he could use was smokescreen. Maybe he could be using other things, but that's what this video is about. Why does One for All, from as far as we've seen it, only have utility type quirks? And I was kind of curious about that, and that basically is going to summarize this entire video. I'm going to break down everything and I'm going to be explaining that. Now, without the whole lengthy fucking 3-minute introduction, let's actually get into the video. Now, from My Hero Academia chapter 308, we have seen almost every single quirk that's within One for All, except for the 2nd and the 3rd user. And from what we see, from the 4th onwards, they're absolutely just all utility quirks. If you look at it, we have the 4th, which is Danger Sense, the 5th, which is Black Whip, the 6th, which is Smokescreen, which was just recently revealed, and then we have the 7th, Nanashimura, which is Float. Basically, it's flight. You can fly with that quirk. Screw the name Float, it's flight, okay? But my question is, why is that? Why are there so many utility quirks and no power quirks, despite One for All having a sole purpose of defeating All for One? Now, wouldn't it be easier to fight All for One if you had power quirks to assist on top of the whole physical stockpiling that the One for All does for a person? Now, with that said, let me tell you, because I'm pretty sure I figured it out. Now, we all know the history behind the quirk by now. It's been forced down our throats since the beginning of the entire series. So basically, again, if you somehow forgot, I'll remind you. So, All for One had a quirk, and his younger brother was thought to be quirkless. All for One pitied his fragile younger brother, and so he forced the ability to stockpile power onto his younger brother. Then it was later realized that the younger brother did in fact have a quirk, which was to pass on the quirk, which was pretty useless on its own. Now, with the fusion of stockpiling power and then being able to pass it on, One for All was born. Now, after this, All For One realized that how useful that would be, so he tried to take the quirk back because he's a son of a gun.
I don't want peace. I want problems, always!
Now, since All For One was the leader of a crime syndicate, his younger brother wanted to defeat his older brother, but then he knew he was a bit too weak to do this, so he passed on his quirk in hopes of getting it stronger to the point where it would be able to defeat All For One. Now, I believe this was the first instance of the One For All being passed on to a power type user. So basically, the second and the third users were both power type quirks that either enhanced or had powerful attacks, like for example, Bakugo's explosion. By the way, I am not encouraging, I'm not feeding into the whole theory that the second user actually is a time travel Bakugo, because fuck that. But eventually, the third user saw that power alone wouldn't be enough to defeat All For One, so he fled and then started looking for more utility-based quirk users in order to improve the overall functionality of the quirk, and he hoped that if me, a heavy hitter, wouldn't be able to kill All For One, then maybe someone with more mobility and utility would be able to do it. And so he ended up passing on the quirk onto Danger Sense guy. I'm not gonna call them by their names because most likely I forgot their names, but he passed it on to the fourth user with Danger Sense, because then that person would be able to tell if All For One is nearby and probably use the quirk like in Ultra Instinct from Dragon Ball or Muso Tensei from Fist of the North Star. But he was in hopes that maybe Danger Sense would be able to help the user evade All For One's attacks, as well as in case they're too weak, just avoid them in general. Eventually, we have the whole situation with the fourth user who wasn't able to defeat All For One and instead decided to isolate himself. He was known as a hermit. So he decided to isolate himself and train the quirk, and then he started realizing that he's getting weaker and he has to pass on this quirk. He can't die alone with this quirk, so he had to pass it on, and eventually he gave it to the fifth user, who is Black Whip, Danguro Danjo, something like that, right? Because he needed an easier way to either like restrain All For One or run away. Because running is not gonna help. You can have Danger Sense, but running is not gonna help. So Black Whip will help you be Spider-Man and just flee away from the situation. Now, we know since Black Whip had faced All For One before and somehow survived it, well, at least the first time, we know that Black Whip was either there to restrain or run away from All For One. And then after a while, he gave it to the sixth user because Smokescreen could either function as a way to beat All For One either by blinding him or would make running away much easier, but running is still an issue. So despite that, despite having somewhat enough strength, at that point the sixth user decided to pass it on to Nana Shimura since Nana could fly. So despite them having enough power at that point, the sixth user decided to pass on the quirk onto Nana Shimura since she could fly, thus increasing her ability to fight All For One, since I believe currently at that time All For One had recently gained an airborne ability. You know, the one that he used when fighting against All Might? Yeah, I'm assuming that he at that point gained the ability to fly, and therefore giving the ability to Nana Shimura, who could also fly, would help fight All For One with an airborne instead of having a distance disadvantage. But we know how that turned out, and Nana Shimura ended up dead. This inevitably failed, and Nana Shimura ended up passing on the quirk to Toshinori Yagi, where she believed that at this point, yeah, I'm strong enough, but the quirk could still get a bit stronger. And so she passed it on to All Might, and then All Might passed it on to Izuku. That's just a theory on why the quirks are so weak, because throughout the entire history of One For All and All For One, they had focused on the idea of, okay, strength didn't work the first time, so let's try and use utility and let's try beat him in another way instead of going and fighting All For One head on, since clearly that's not working and he has a lot of powerful quirks. So we have to do something else. We have to be creative with the way we fight this dude. Therefore, they started passing on the quirks to people who had utility. For example, Smokescreen, therefore you can blind him and beat him that way. Black Whip, you can probably restrain him and then either lock him up or beat him that way, since you can tie him up and then beat him with raw power, as just like when Izuku was doing the same shit to Tomura Shigaraki. Or you could have the whole situation with Danger Sense, which Izuku did use against Muscular in the latest chapter, where he was using it exactly like Ultra Instinct. He was using Danger Sense to evade attacks that were coming head on. So it seems like throughout all of this, they were focusing on what are other ways we could beat All For One? Danger Sense, use it to evade. Black Whip, we could use it to restrain. Smokescreen, we could either use it to run away or to blind him. Flight, oh shit, All For One can now fly. We need to be able to fight him up there in the sky. And then that's where it ended off. That's why I believe the first and the second are both power type quirks. Now there will be definitely criticisms towards this whole idea, this whole theory, such as they didn't know that the quirk would be passed on as well. And I'm saying, yeah, they didn't know. That's why they kept on passing it. Instead of saying, yeah, I'm passing on my smoke screen onto your flight, now you can use smoke screen while flying. No, they just thought, you can fly, use that instead. Like screw the utility thing. You can now fly. You should just fight him as is in the sky. Now when I prompted this idea, this whole theory, to a friend, he said it is probable, but he finds it hard to believe since there's because of the whole constant searching for users with certain quirks, and most people wouldn't comply to taking a quirk. Then I beg to differ. Most people would be up to taking more quirks. Like, oh shit, you have the ability to pass on quirks? I have a quirk, give it on to me. This guy shouldn't be hard at all. And then they take on the quirk, and then they try and fight All For One, and then they end up getting killed. But I do believe that they did think, okay, pass on the quirk to me, and then I will take it. Most likely, from what we've seen throughout the meetings within One For all of these users have had a somewhat close connection. And I think they either had a close connection because one had to train the other on how to use the quirk, or they already knew each other. So if we're going through the route of they already knew each other, then it would be the case of, oh shit, I have this quirk, but it seems like it's not working. You have this quirk, so let me pass it on to you. For example, it would be a case of Nana Shimura being like, yeah, I can fly, but it doesn't seem as if I'm fast enough to do it. So Gran Torino, you're my friend, and you know that I have this quirk, so let me pass it on to you, and maybe you will be able to use it much better than I can. You know, that's in the situation of, yes, I knew a person had this quirk, let me pass it on to them. If it was the case of hunting, then it would be more optional, or you'd open to the idea that this person was running away from All For One, and then just ended up finding someone with a quirk, and it was like, you have a useful quirk. Probably like the person, like there's this one YouTube channel who prompted up the idea that a user could be at death's door and was desperate to pass on the quirk, and it was like, you random stranger, please take this quirk and run away with it. You know, it's like, what's your quirk? I have the ability to smoke green. Perfect, take this quirk, run away, use it to run away, or something like that. But then I also put a hole in that and said, it's not really probable, because then what if the person you were just desperately passing on the quirk to wasn't able to handle it, and then they ended up exploding? Because you have to find out somehow that that quirk would make you explode, right? That it would destroy your body if you weren't fitted for it. So I do believe that they went specifically hunting for people who had certain quirks that they believed could assist them. As to how they found these people, I have no idea. But they definitely did end up finding these people. And another reason as to why this whole idea of passing on utility to utility was more probable is because back then, in the golden era of quirks, you know, when quirks first started establishing themselves, and there was the whole ratio of there's less quirk users and more non-quirk users, right? Before that scale started getting tilted, All For One had a whole crime syndicate, and at that point the third user probably realized this guy has way too many followers who are trying to kill me for him, or trying to capture me for him. So he ended up finding the danger sense guy and gave the quirk to him, and is like, now that you have the ability to sense nearby danger, you'll know if All For One's minions and his followers are nearby. Therefore, you can use that ability to escape. And then the guy was like, I bet. Then he passed it on to Dangoro Danjo. And Dangoro Danjo decided, okay, I have a black whip. I can probably restrain some of them, but not all of them. So he passed it on to the smokescreen guy. And the smokescreen guy is like, if they decide to pull up, I'll just blind them. Simple as that. I'll blind them and I'll whoop their ass. Simple. Then he could have passed it on to Nana Shimura. Nana can just fly away from most of the threats. Simple as that. and then passed it on to All Might. All Might was just like, yeah, I'm gonna just whoop your ass straight. You wanna square up? We'll square up, fair day, and then I'll whoop your ass. And then that's how the entire situation goes. So, to sum it all up, the history behind why the utility quirks are so prominent compared to the actual power type quirks is because they decided to take different approaches on defeating All For One, because they realized from the second and the third user that power alone wasn't enough to defeat All For One. And so they needed to take a different approach, whether it would be blinding him, attacking him from the air, restraining him, or being able to just dodge him or avoid him. I truly believe that's the reason why One For All has so many utilities and not enough power. And with that said, that's basically me summarizing as to why One For All is absolutely weak. Not weak, but more of, it could have been stronger. You understand what I'm saying? And maybe you'll understand what I've been saying throughout this entire video, or maybe it'll fall upon deaf ears. Who knows? But if you understand where I'm coming from, you do realize that the One For All could have been stronger had it been passed on to people who had stronger quirks. For example, if Muscular was a good guy and you passed on the One For All to him, then you understand where I'm coming from, right? So that's why I think it's weak in the aspect of it's physically not strong, but utility wise, yeah, it's the strongest quirk that you can find in the My Hero Academia universe aside from All For One. And that, again, ladies and gentlemen, is why One For All is absolutely weak. With that said, if you made it this far into the video, it means you kinda were interested by this topic, and you might be interested by more topics on my YouTube channel. Like, for example, my reason as to why Sukuna from Jujutsu Kaisen can defeat Gojo Satoru. And you can definitely go check that out, or you can check out my different chapter reviews where I try and voice out, or I do a news format for that chapter review. But recently I've been voicing it out. Therefore, look forward to 2 weeks from now, or at least a week from now, with Muscular versus Izuku, the full fight. I already have the thumbnail and the whole voice ready for it. I am just waiting for the final chapter to finalize everything. And yeah, if you made it this far, again, consider liking or subscribing, because that really helps this channel a lot, right? I'm trying to grow this channel, and I'm trying to make it, I want to find a way to prove to people that, yeah, I'm not just wasting my time, even though I'm doing this as a hobby and to have fun. I want to entertain you, and maybe it'll entertain a friend of yours. So again, if you enjoyed it, if you made it this far, consider hitting the like button or the subscribe button, and I will see you again in the next video, probably next week or 2 weeks from now. I do have another stain video on its way, in the middle of processing, so I'll see you then. With that said, this has been Biscord signing out. Bye.